Some of you know I just got back from vacation and a trip around the country, really. I woke up in New York City yesterday and had breakfast. Then I had dinner in Seattle. And then I watched Stranger Things and fell asleep here in Honolulu. All in one day. Now, it's a marvel to be able to travel so far, so fast, right? My dad has this theory that if a citizen of the sort of first century Roman Empire, came back to the United States, was transported to today, they'd see a car go by, and they'd say, yeah, I get that, it's like a chariot, but a lot more people have one, and they go a little faster, and they don't have any horses, and charm, or a charm. They might see a home, whether it's a family home for one person or one family or an apartment building, and say, yeah, that's pretty much like what we had, you can build them a lot higher than we could safely, and with a lot less marble, but sure, yeah, that'll do. But then, they might hear something from above and look to the sky. They might even be outside of this church or up on the second floor meeting room and look out the window and see jet airplanes in the sky banking to and fro. They might even see military jets taking off at angles and speeds that are kind of unthinkable, even when you see them today. And they might point to the sky and start asking questions about what kind of magic is happening, or what kind of work of the gods might be happening around them. And what my father's theory means, what he's getting at, is that this common way that we all travel now between world capitals in a single day in a matter of hours would be one of the things that would really stand out to someone from ancient Rome that had many of the things we have today. It would stand out without an explanation of some kind of supernatural variety. Of course, after our discussion with them of security protocols, cramped seating, subpar food, among other elements of ever-increasing indignities of air travel, our Roman friend might rethink whether there's anything particularly supernatural at work there. Because we know together that travel means long lines, luggage carousels, planes, trains, automobiles. These are the realities that sometimes distract us from the larger truth of travel. How humans travel and how we go from one place to another so quickly is really kind of amazing. And this marvel of travel is a huge part of our spiritual theme for the month of adventure. Just think about the look on our Roman friend's face if they caught a ride, not just on an airplane, but on a moon lander, or if they took a stroll on the International Space Station. These are things humans do now. Some of the most remarkable accomplishments of engineering and many other disciplines arise from a desire to get from where we are to where we want to go. They arise from the desire or the need for an adventure. And for those of us who can't go on adventures to the moon or to the space station or in a jet fighter, there are plenty of adventure stories for you to take in. This isn't a plug for Stranger Things, but it's pretty good. I was watching it last night. But adventure stories are some of the most popular stories in all of our shared human consciousness. Adventure stories in a wide range of cultures, not just our own, are foundational to the oral, to the written, to the visual storytelling of humans. We heard an oral storytelling today of an important adventure story. And often, they're really, really fun. One of my favorite adventure stories begins like this. It's set in a tropical jungle, and it's the home of a people who are brilliant engineers. These geniuses of engineering devise some of the most effective and elegant ways to solve the challenges they face. And one of their challenges is protecting that which is most sacred to them. And they accomplish feats in this adventure that are the stuff of ancient and powerful legends that stretch across continents that stretch across the very globe. Then one day, a band of robbers shows up to try to take what is sacred to them. And between their engineered protections, their own physical force, they put up an amazing fight. At almost every turn, there is a way to keep the invaders from getting too close to the heart of their sacred space. But one of the robbers uses tactics and a lot of luck to avoid all their engineered protections and escapes with his life, while many of his friends and his band die. And the group of brilliant engineers chases this last robber all the way to shore and chases him away. But unfortunately, the robber escapes with a sacred object. But the genius and the labor of the years that these folks put into protecting what is sacred was an adventure of its own. In fact, some of those feats of engineering featured in the story created indelible, iconic images in the genre of adventure storytelling. Now, oddly, this story ended up bearing as its title the name of the robber, instead of the brilliant people whose place of sacred worship was invaded and plundered. I like to call the movie Geniuses of the Jungle. Other people call it Indiana Jones. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, you might look at it a little differently now. But we all get it, that every adventure story needs a hero. That's just how it goes. And there are some great ones out there, but not all the heroes of adventures are fictitious. In fact, some of the best adventures are real. And where we are right now, in this place, puts us square in the middle of one of the ways a lot of truly astounding adventures began. Religion. That's right, you came to church, you're going to hear about religion. Much of the history of any religion is a history of travel and adventure. How religion started, yeah, that's important, and we'll get there someday. We'll call that the mystery of faith, but the adventure of a faith is really kind of the history of faith, mystery and history. Some of the most popular stories to read in the early Christian tradition were the stories of people who traveled to faraway places to carry the message of their faith. The narratives written by supporters of these adventurers extol the virtues of these heroes while also detailing the lengths that these heroes went in the name of their faith. The story of St. Patrick. We all think about St. Patrick, St. Patrick's Day, things like that, the patron saint of Ireland. His story was compiled a few centuries after his actual life ended, and was told by two of his, healthy supporters, shall we say. It reads, of course, with some miracles, but it also kind of reads like Treasure Island. There's pirates, there's marooning on a deserted island, there's second chances, and of course, there's some eventual redemption. It's quite a squirrel turn. But this isn't news for many people. I see everyone shaking their heads. I know you missed me. So this isn't really news for people about religion. Newsflash. Super religious people who get on boats or planes to carry their faith to others see themselves as on a mission or on an adventure. And that is not news. It is especially not news on this island, and it should not be news in this building, which was constructed to house direct descendants of a couple who embarked on an adventure to spread the message of their faith on this very island. In fact, the lands and memory of this island hold some of the most recent and best recorded histories of religious people coming to spread the message of their faith that were ever written. And the voyage of Admiral James Cook paved many of their ways. But before Admiral Cook ever came to this island, the crew of his first ship, the Endeavour, was the source of one of the most misunderstood and inappropriately used stories about adventures like these. See, the botanist aboard Cook's ship, Joseph Banks, he liked to write a lot about himself. Granted, it was in his diary, but still, it's quite a read. So as the Endeavour, in his view, moved a little closer to shore of what was later named Australia, they spotted a number of folks who called that place home long before the Europeans ever arrived. And Banks was mystified that the folks he could observe fishing along the coast didn't pay him any attention. Of course, there could only be one explanation in his mind. They couldn't see him. You know, it's a very sophisticated way of thinking. If I close my eyes, no one can see me. You know, true man of science. His theory was that these simple folk had never seen something like the Endeavour, so it just slipped past their visual recognition abilities. And this myth was later repeated. It's repeated to this day as fact in one of these movies called What the Bleak Do We Know, among other places. It's made the rounds over the years in conversations and in stories about adventures and adventurers, but it's not true. I mean, the ships were there, and the people living in that part of the world knew well what a ship was. Many of them sailed them all over the place. Now, the moment Cook's crew began actually to come ashore, they were met with some suspicion and with a lot of lances. Yeah. If the people living there knew what would follow over the coming decades, there might have been more lances. Now, some people still hold to this story of the invisible ships and the hapless natives. I even repeated this fiction myself before I knew any better. It was only later that I learned it was a fallacy, but Banks's diary, his entry demonstrates the way that adventurers misinterpret the meaning of the actions of those persons whose homes they later enter uninvited or unwelcomed. And the myth that grew from this story, repeated over time, demonstrates the pernicious way that those who retell the story of adventurers, often cast as the heroes, insist upon a narrative of the naive and the simple person who didn't even see what was coming that they met. And it seems to me, somehow, we still celebrate the adventurer who took what wasn't theirs in many ways. It's not only in the movies. When I was on the continent this past week, it would have been hard to miss the celebration, the latest repetition of the story of the great adventure of a nation born out of rebellion and shaped in the highest ideals of liberty. In truth, I have not yet been on these islands for Independence Day, so I don't know what it's like here. But I spent the evening of the 4th of July in Saratoga Springs, New York, only a few miles from the battleground of one of the decisive battles of the War for the Colonies' independence from England. I did not seek out fireworks, though plenty were being set off around me. I did not march in a parade or sing a patriotic song. I wasn't really in the mood, to be perfectly honest. Because last week, I watched tanks roll in to the capital of a nation with enough military capability to cross or collapse every man-made border on Earth and to obliterate a planet many times over. July 4th, though, it is not an anniversary of a military victory, whether you roll tanks through the streets or not. At its best, it is the anniversary of an idea whose time had come that all are created equal and endowed by the Creator with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But at its worst, for many, it is a reminder, an actual anniversary of how a nation so conceived in liberty falls so short, so often, for so many. And at least for me, the question I had, after earlier in the week, seeing the image of Oscar Alberto Martinez and his 23-month-old daughter, Angie Valeria, lying face down on the banks of the Rio Grande, was seared into my consciousness. The question I had was, how a nation so powerful can lack the will or the compassion to prevent the death of a father and a daughter forced to cross that river in flight from a nation whose entire economy was upended by the commercial interests of our own nation, who were only yearning to be free. But that myth that somehow a nation was born on July 4th persists in the minds of many and is fed by those who seek to consolidate power under the guise of patriotism. But it is a myth, just like the invisible ships. The colonies founded by the direct ancestors of Unitarians, the colonies, as it turned out, founded by the direct ancestors of the family that built the structure we are all in, did not want a centralized federal government on July 4th, 1776. The only thing less popular among colonists than the Continental Congress and the Continental Army was remaining part of England. And there's actually a Unitarian Universalist church in the heart of Boston that didn't even want to leave England. A loyalist church called King's Chapel that you can all go visit. It's quite something. They all wear Episcopalian garb. It's really something. Anyway, I digress. When letters, to give you an idea, when letters were sent out to the colonies from the Continental Congress with the numbers of troops each should send to the Continental Army, an assignment which, by the way, was actually paid less than being in a continental militia, not one colony sent the number that were requested. If anything, July 4th should be the day we celebrate the colonial reluctance to add to the history of war-making nations. But we get it, because somehow the adventurers we remember, the ones that seem to persist the most, the heroes who win, are the ones that come with a military escort. See, if you're carrying the ideals of your faith with you to others, but you are also a Roman citizen and a Roman Catholic bishop, backed by the protection of the world's strongest military army, or if you are exploring the Pacific Ocean, but you are flying the flag of the most heavily armed naval force on the earth and co-representing multinational commercial interests, or if you're just a humble minister who starts a convenience store on Oahu, but both the local monarchy and the military of your native nation have your back, then your adventure isn't really the kind that is at the heart of what we might think of as a real spiritual adventure. Yours is more the kind of adventure where you're protected wherever you go, so that you can build an empire or take over an island. If you are alone and scared and vulnerable in your home, but you climb aboard the top of a train, rattling through the southern part of a continent anyway. If you anguish over the horrible choice between the safety of a child where you are and the possibility of a better life elsewhere across a man-made border, but you choose to try for the chance of something better than the certainty of the same where I am, if you realize only too late that your hopes resting in a place like America are dashed, but you try to get your child across the river even if you know you can't make it, if mercy matters more to you than life, then that is a different kind of adventure. It's the kind of adventure whose path stretches from a heart as much as it does from a home, across a soul as much as it does across a border, and encircles a body as much as it does a new home wherever you go. It is the adventure that so many millions made in building a nation that is still meant to be freedom. It is the adventure that many more millions suffered by defending a nation that is meant and still means justice. It is the adventure that hundreds of millions are living today that still means liberty. Yet when it seems that freedom, justice, and liberty are met still with bondage, inequality, and unfairness wherever you go, then there can hardly be peace, at home or in the heart. And so I celebrated this Independence Day differently. Some weeks ago, I ordered something to be delivered in Saratoga, where I would be. I ordered a new attorney identification card from the New York court system. I let my old one expire when I found this new way of life. And a few days before the 4th, I went to the courthouse in Saratoga, literally around the corner from the Revolutionary War battlefield I mentioned, and picked up my newly printed attorney ID. Then I flew thousands of miles home here so that in the coming weeks, I can enter the Honolulu Federal Detention Center and assist in defending those who are threatened in their migration process in these lands. Where far too many are forced to navigate detention and deportation proceedings alone, unrepresented. Anyone navigating that process who has any living person show up at their proceedings is 4 times more likely to get to stay. And no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, having someone unrepresented in a court of law is just plain wrong. Someone is messing with this earth's children, and we're going to go get their backs. Never forget. Never forget for a moment that any power we are given is made sacred only when we use it to defend those from whom that power has been taken. And Unitarian Universalism, our faith, broken long ago from the chains of its master church, and we, the people who hold a faith in common with hearts and minds like Jefferson and like Adams, not to mention her husband John. And this, our community, drawn together with strands from so much that is sacred around this world, may hold a place yet in this adventure. There is yet a chance to plan with the genius we know is possible from a small group of dedicated individuals to protect what is sacred to us. There is yet a chance to fight for the rights of at least one person at a time if we can. There is yet a chance to be the hero of the adventure we set out upon. Until the lands held by this nation that seems somehow to disappoint too many for too long might ring at last with the sound of understanding another's life. We might call it compassion. Might sound the beat for the march of undreamed of liberty. We might call that justice. Might shout from the purple mountains to the raging sea the good news of an adventure that should not be alien to anyone anymore, the pursuit at long last of happiness. We might call it joy. Yeah. And may it ever be so. Blessed be